This is Camille Laguerre coming to you with First Readings, a podcast for writers and readers who want to read stories aloud. This series is a learning experience for me, so I'm going to change it up a little with each episode. For instance, I think in the future I'm going to do the excerpt first, and then talk about some element of reading and recording it. But today, instead of a regular excerpt, I'm going to talk about an easy way to start doing character voices, and I'll be reading a little poem in different voices as I tell you about how to do it. For me, one of the big barriers to reading aloud my own work was not just doing the voices to my own satisfaction, but also the fact that once I did master a voice, or sort of master a voice, I couldn't switch in and out of it. I'd start to read some dialogue between two characters with different accents, and the words would outstrip my tongue, and the next thing you know, the characters would switch voices, with the butler talking like a hoodlum, and a shy little girl talking like the butler. I realized that the main issue was that I wasn't good enough at doing voices yet, so I had to concentrate so hard on each one that I couldn't keep track of the words in the story. So I have two techniques that help me get past that point. They both involve using only one voice at first. They're also something to do when you are practicing at home alone, reading to your cat, your toys, or yourself. The first technique is to simply not do a dialogue voices at all. Instead, pick a voice, any voice, and read the whole darn thing in that. I like to use an exaggerated or funny voice, so I don't have to get it exactly right. But really, it can be any voice at first. Just a little deeper or higher, or with a little bit of an accent. In your next session, try a different voice. Or you can read the same passage in one voice and then another. And that's an exercise you can come back to as you develop your ability to do voices. It's a great way to get better at the character part. How would different characters deliver the same lines? And that's what I'm going to read today. I've been looking through old pulp magazines on archive.org, and a lot of them have little poems throughout, just bits of doggerel or jokes or commentary type fillers. The magazine in question is called New Love. It was a romance magazine published in 1943 by Fictioneers, which was a division of Popular Publishing, which published things like Dime Detective and The Mysterious Fu Wang. This is the March issue of New Love, but print magazines went on sale ahead of their date, so this was likely published in January or even December of 1942. And that means that everything in this magazine was probably created very soon after America's entry into the war. Everything in the issue is focused on the war. Stories about falling in love with a man who was 4F, or was he just a slacker, or about volunteering for the war effort and finding a husband. The poem I'm going to read now is a little ditty about how everything changed in that first year of the war because of rationing and shortages. Things like rubber and metal were reserved for the manufacture of jeeps and tanks and planes. Silk was reserved for parachutes. But in a love magazine, some things never change. So here's the first voice. I'll start off with some cowboy talk, on account of the fact that I write a mystery series that is narrated by a young gunslinger. I'm going to exaggerate it a little bit on account of me not being so good at it yet. No Substitute by Alan Hart. There's a substitute for rubber we all may use someday. Our tin cans change to glassware in a magic sort of way. Silk alters into rayon in dresses smart and bright. But one thing must be steady if life is to seem right. In order to be happy in this all-changing year, I must be very certain of your true love, my dear. Okay, that went all right. What next? Let's go for a female, the ingenue. In books of that period, there was often a young woman, and she'd be sweet and kind of scared of life, but very earnest. So instead of an accent, I'm going to use a higher, softer, and more earnest voice. No Substitute by Alan Hart. There's a substitute for rubber we all may use someday. Our tin cans change to glassware in a magic sort of way. Silk alters into rayon in dresses smart and bright. But one thing must be steady if life is to seem right. In order to be happy in this all-changing year, I must be very certain of your true love, my dear. I'm going to do 2 more, but before I do that, I want you to realize that I've been practicing this, and I tried a bunch of voices before I settled on which ones I was going to do here. I'll just be honest and say a lot of them sucked. That's why we're practicing. So now we're going to do a deep voice, and I'm going to do a different attitude with someone I call Angry Guy. No Substitute by Alan Hart. There's a substitute for rubber we all may use someday. Our tin cans change to glassware in a magic sort of way. Silk alters into rayon and dresses smart and bright. But one thing must be steady, if life is to seem right. In order to be happy in this all-changing year, I must be very certain of your true love, my dear. And last, just because she's a contrast to the ingenue, I'm going to do a catty, sarcastic sort of socialite. No Substitute by Alan Hart. There's a substitute for rubber that we all may use some day. Our tin cans change to glassware in a magic sort of way. Silk alters into rayon in dresses smart and bright. But one thing must be steady if life is to seem right. In order to be happy in this all-changing year, I must be very certain of your true love, my dear. That's it for the poem. I mentioned that I had another technique for getting started on doing dialogue. When I'm practicing reading just in my own voice, and I come across a scene with a bunch of people talking, I pick just one person to give a different voice to, usually a woman, since the easiest thing to do is just make a voice higher. But an accent or slow delivery or something like that can also be an easy way to start. So if you have trouble switching from voice to voice, just work on one voice. Then practice switching back and forth from your voice to that one other voice. Next time I'll talk about finding the right voice and how sometimes the right voice is the wrong voice. But that's it for this week. The poem was No Substitute by Alan Hart, published in New Love magazine in March of 1943. Voice recording and sound editing by Camille Laguerre. The theme music is Salut d'Amour by Edward Elgar from a collection titled Royalty-Free Music, Greatest Piano. So long, and see you in the funny papers.